In this video you'll learn how to use WikiTraccs, the Confluence to SharePoint migration tool, to migrate content from Confluence to SharePoint. And on my screen you currently see two browser windows. One is our source Confluence. It's a Confluence cloud, but the tool works for cloud and on-premises environments starting with Confluence version 6. And in Confluence Cloud I'm in this test-based migration cloud, and I'll be migrating this to SharePoint Online. This is the browser on the right side. I already migrated 3 pages, so we can see something here, but the other pages will be migrated in a moment. And while showing the migration, I will also be using WikiPack. That is the second product. So there are two: WikiTraccs, the migration tool, WikiPack, that you can add to the game, and WikiPack is bringing the SharePoint page tree back, currently showing the 3 pages, and there will be more pages after the migration, because the migration tool also migrates metadata for the page tree. So, but when you get started, you first go to the website wikitransformationproject.com and click the try for free button, then follow the trail to the download. I'm using GitHub as distribution channel. Click download release and you'll end up with a zip file. You unzip and you can get started. So the trial version has no size limit and no time limit, so you can test migrate as long as you want and with as many pages and attachments as you want. And after downloading, you start WikiTraccs, and this is basically a console application running locally on any Windows-based machine. This can be an Azure VM, can be an on-premises migration machine, can also be a laptop at your home. It just needs to connect to Confluence and to SharePoint. So it will download content from Confluence to the local machine that has page content, metadata, and attachments, and then it will transform that to something that SharePoint can understand and upload it to SharePoint Online. Now, this tool has a very simple configuration UI that has 4 steps. And the first step is you tell it where's Confluence. The second step is where's SharePoint. In the third step, you test the connections. And in the fourth step, you can actually already start the migration. And I'll guide you through all those steps right now. And the first thing the tool needs is the Confluence base address. So let's get back to Confluence, copy that, and for Confluence Cloud, that's up to /wiki up here. Paste that here. Okay, so Confluence base address is here. And for Confluence authentication type, I recommend interactive login. Interactive login means that when the migration starts, a browser window will open. You log in to Confluence using a migration account that you choose, and then the migration tool WikiTraccs takes over this user session, and all access to Confluence will happen as this user account. If interactive login for whatever reason does not work, there's also an option to use a personal access token, and also great for testing. There are lots of Atlassian Confluence instances in the internet, from universities, from governments, for documentation purposes, and they are accessible anonymously, and if you want to test migrations you can also use those. So, but for now it's interactive login, and that's it for the Confluence part. There's nothing you have to install. This should work. On to step 2. Step 2 is the connection to SharePoint. On the SharePoint side, you need at least 2 site collections that you have to prepare, and the very first site collection is the so-called WikiTraccs site. This is like an engine room that is for the migration tool and will contain information and data around the migration. So this is used by WikiTraccs. It also contains a SharePoint list that will be used for the migration mapping, so which spaces should be migrated to which sites. We will do that in one of the next steps. So this is a WikiTraccs site, and then you need at least 1 second site collection as target for your pages, but there will probably be more site collections. So one very simple mapping is migrating each source space to a single target SharePoint site, and then if you have 100 spaces, you would have to prepare 100 site collections, and you have to prepare those site collections. The tool does not create them. So I already prepared such a site collection. Let's switch over to SharePoint, grab the URL of the WikiTraccs site, put that in here. Then we need the SharePoint tenant ID. There's a detection button, filling that in. And then, important, you need an Entra ID application registered. This is a requirement by Microsoft so that client applications can access the SharePoint API, Microsoft Graph. And you have to configure that, or your Azure team or Entra ID team. And there's also this question mark button. When you click that, a blog post opens explaining why it's required, which configuration options to choose, and also a troubleshooting guide if something goes wrong. So please refer to that or get in touch if there are any issues. For authentication, you choose interactive. Interactive means that when starting the migration, a browser window will open, and using a migration account for SharePoint, you log into SharePoint, and then access will happen as a combination of the registered Entra ID application and this account. So the tool is using delegated permissions, not application permissions. So it's not acting as its own entity. There always needs to be a migration account. And this is also your way of restricting access to SharePoint. So this SharePoint migration account does not need any administrative permissions like SharePoint or tenant administrator. It just needs to be a site collection administrator for the target sites for your migration, where pages will be created. And that's it for the SharePoint part. Now on to step 3, and step 3 is configuration validation. Let's test the connections. You click Test Confluence Connection, and the browser window will open. It navigates to the Confluence base address you configured in the first step, and I'm already logged in. That's why the browser window closed really fast, and the tool detected it can get all session cookies and can access Confluence. That's good. Now for SharePoint, the same. You click Test SharePoint Connection, and this opens a browser where I'm already signed in as Adele. I'm using this account here. And the tool checks that permissions are okay, that it can create pages, and so on. And then we'll report back. And if everything goes as planned, it looks like this. So connections are fine. And when the connection test for Confluence was successful, and the connection test for SharePoint, you click this Update Space Inventory and WikiTraccs site button. And this is the first time that the tool reaches out to Confluence and asks Confluence about all spaces it got. So in my case, in my instance, it's 789 spaces, and it will read basic information about those spaces. So that's space name, space key, and so on. And the tool now writes this information into a SharePoint list. And we will use this SharePoint list in a moment to select spaces to migrate. Okay, it's done. Perfect. Now on to step 4. You click Open Space Inventory List to choose sources. And this opens the WikiTraccs site, the very first site collection you configured. And let's see, I have to filter that because this environment is used for on-prem and for cloud demos. So we are in Confluence Cloud. It's 789 rows, and each row in this SharePoint list corresponds to one space in the source Confluence. And now I need to find my my space to migrate. I know the space key, so I can use the filter functionality from SharePoint, like it's TM. Apply that. That looks good. And yeah, I recommend using editing grid view. That makes it real easy. And then there's this request transformation column, and you use this to select spaces for migration. And now let me remove this this check mark here again, this filter, to show the other spaces as well. So you can also select multiple spaces for migration, like this hierarchy test space. Let's select that also. And this means when starting the migration tool goes to this list, looks for all places where this check mark has been set, here for 2 spaces, and the tool knows what to migrate. Now it also needs to know where to migrate to in SharePoint, and there's right next to the request transformation column is the target site root URL column. And you put your target site address in here. Has to be the root of a site collection, so the tool does not migrate to subsites, but to the root site, and you copy that and fill it into this field here. So site collections is something you prepare. Often there are specific requirements around naming, permissions. Maybe site collections already exist, and so on. So you can prepare site collections or select existing ones and then just point the tool to those site collections. And the second space shall be migrated to another site collection here. So let's exit grid view. And yeah, well, basically we need this in a moment. So let me copy that, exit grid view, switch back to the blue WikiTraccs window, and there's now one last edit field we have to fill in. That is the default target site. So if you, and I switch back to the mapping list, if you don't enter a value in the target site root URL column for whatever reason, then the tool still needs to know where to migrate, and it will use this default entered here. And that's it. I'll now click Start Transformation, and when you click that, the tool tests connections again. Connection to Confluence, connection to SharePoint. Maybe you're in a kind of lockdown environment. It will detect if all endpoints are accessible. Will report back if that is not the case. And now a second console application starts, and this is doing the heavy lifting. This does the actual migration, and the two work together. So you can now look at 2 places. Either the black window, it's showing a very detailed view of what's going on currently with regard to the migration. This also needs to authenticate. This is fine. But you also can look at the blue window, and the blue window will show progress bars. And let's open both here. Okay, so the blue window shows its processing space TM. This is my test space migration. There are 34 pages it found in this space, and 3 have already been migrated. So that means it's scheduled 31 pages for migration, and this is a migration queue. So WikiTraccs, when starting the migration for all spaces you selected, goes to Confluence and asks Confluence about those spaces. How many pages have you got? Give me the page IDs. And then those page IDs go into a queue, and WikiTraccs, one by one, page ID by page ID, picks one from the queue, goes to Confluence, gets the content, gets the metadata of this page, downloads the attachments, convert that to a modern SharePoint page, creates a modern SharePoint page in SharePoint in the site pages library, uploads the attachments, and then continues with the next page. And you can leave it here for hours or even days, and it will happily migrate away. And yeah, migration speed is also shown of the based on the last pages migrated, and that will depend on cloud performance at Microsoft, Atlassian, but also how many links are on pages, or especially how many attachments are there. Is it one attachment per page or 500 attachments per page? So this might vary, and that's why I always recommend doing a test migration for usual content in your Confluence. And now it's migrating, and when you look at, let's see that we get our SharePoint here. First migration target site. Let's go to the home page. Look at the site pages library. So all pages in SharePoint go to the site pages library. This is also the case here. Let's filter that again, that we only have our cloud pages. Yep, apply. And I already selected a view that WikiTraccs creates, and this is the recent pages WikiTraccs view. So normal and out of the box SharePoint, this view does not exist, this document library view, but WikiTraccs creates that, and it shows additional information for the migrated pages. So it's like the Confluence title, then when was the migration, and also metrics per page. And this is a good first indicator of how successful your migration was. There's one column, failed transformations. This should be green and 0. So if there are any non-zero number here, you should check this page. Might be a broken page from a past migration, or some strange macros. So there's crazy stuff out there. So this needs to be checked. And then also this text transferred % column. So this should be 100%. And WikiTraccs, when migrating content, counts every character in the source Confluence page, and then after creating the SharePoint page, also counts every character of text in the target SharePoint page, and those have to match. And if they don't match, that could mean that content got lost, or sometimes there's also more content in SharePoint, and this again often caused by strange macros or macros that need special handling that is not yet built into WikiTraccs. And if that is the case, you should check the page. Often the page is okay, but if there's something strange, just get in touch. And yeah, when now looking at the pages, let's first have a look at Confluence again, how that looked. Where's Confluence? Confluence is here. So we have like a page tree, standard content, special content, info center, and 4 pages here, and they have a 2-column layout, an image, task list, different formatting options. We also have like this lozenge here showing a status. We also have 2 comments and also 1 attachment, and that is this image. And if we now switch to SharePoint, let's use the page tree here to navigate, and you already see that the migration is progressing. There's more content than before here. Let's go to page 1, look at that, and this is also a 2-column layout. You've got the table of contents here that is working. You have the headings, the text, the status lozenge. On the right side, you have the image, a task list, not interactive anymore, but that's how it works when going from Confluence to SharePoint. Lots of interactive Confluence macros stop working in SharePoint because SharePoint has no equivalent, and the tool tries to adapt for that. And yeah, you've got the page attachments. Those are migrated to the site assets library in SharePoint, where SharePoint also puts its own page attachments. For example, when you paste an image to a page, it goes to a special folder in the site assets library. And WikiTraccs also uses this location and just shows it here by using a list view web part. And the old comments from Confluence, the footer comments, are migrated to the page content. If you choose this option, you can also deactivate that in the settings. And now you can see things are progressing, and I just recommend trying it out. So you have everything you need is out there. So just download the tool, wikitransformationproject.com, download, start, no registration needed, no license needed for starters, and then you can test how it works with your content. Thanks for watching.